Hi all, welcome back to the shed. Today we're going to go over how to set battery parameters or the settings in a lot of the SRNE rebranded controllers, such as the eco-worthy 3000 watt 24 volt controller or the Midnite Solar do-it-yourself line, which is also an SRNE rebrand that is 3000 watt 24 volt. They have the same menu and the same configuration also as the Renogy 3500 watt 48 volt inverter, and also the eco-worthy 5000 watt 48 volt inverter. The parameters themselves will change, but how to access them in the menu will be the absolute same. Reason why the parameters change is, of course, some of these are 24 volt, other ones are 48 volt, and that makes a difference, okay? So let's go over it really quick. Let's take a look at what I got over here and do a quick tutorial on how to set up battery settings charge parameters. Okay, so we have the eco-worthy model ECO for Eco. It's a ECO 3000W SR series. This is a 3000 watt 24 volt all-in-one inverter. You can see it is identical to the Midnitesolar, which is a MN3024 do-it-yourself line from Midnitesolar. They're both SRNE rebrands. There's some very subtle differences between these two that I'll go over in a different video. And once I get done with that video, if I haven't already, the link to that will be included below. But as you guys already know, there's a lot of SRNE rebrands out there. I personally think it's a pretty decent brand. I have had literally zero issues with my Midnitesolar, and the eco-worthy is going to be put into use soon. I've got some special applications for it and some other things that are going to be added to it to make it a safer, more complete, legitimate system. Today we're going to use a Midnitesolar to go over the battery parameter settings. They are identical to the eco-worthy. And if you have a 48 volt system as opposed to a 24 volt system, the access in the menu and the flow chart of the menu is identical. We only have to adjust the values, and that's typically doubling it from what I have. But that also depends on what battery you have, and we'll go over some of that also. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Midnitesolar, and let's get into the battery parameter settings and see what we can come up with. And you can see what I've done, which is work beautifully for this system. And I do want to make a note. I am not hooked to the grid at this time. This is a standalone system, and eventually I'm going to hook it up to a generator. So the AC power in is not a thing right now, but in the future it will be, and we'll cover that in a whole other video, but we'll describe how I got around that in the settings themselves and how to set this up as a standalone system. Okay, so in order to set up the battery settings, you can see we're in the main screen right now. I'm pulling about 27 volts and 120 volt AC at the inverter. So if we go over to set, we're going to get into this mode right here where it says, you know, it's got a, mine has a 00 and then an escape ESC, which is basically telling me that we're in the setup mode right there. So this is where you can exit the setting menu. Okay, now if we go up one, click the up button, it's going to go to the parameter number 1, which is our output source priority. Right now mine is set up to SOL, which is PV priority mode, and switching to it'll switch to mains when the PV fails or the battery is lower than the set value of the parameter. Reason why I did that is right now I am currently not hooked to mains power or generator power, so I set those parameters up differently, so it'll never quite get to that point. It just, the inverter will turn off before that. But right now it's just working as a standalone inverter controller all-in-one unit without any mains or generator power for the charger there. If you wanted to change this, you would click on enter, right? And that goes over. At this point, that option continues to flash, and you can go up or down through the different menus. Right now we're going to leave mine on Sol, S-O-L, but if we went to the UTI, I don't know why the whole thing's not popping up there, but anyways, which is actually the default, that's a mains priority mode. And if you're not running any mains power or an alternate power source to your all-in-one unit, it's not going to work properly, okay? It's going to be reaching out for power that's not there. We switch to the inverter only when the main fails, okay? I'm not set up for that. I don't want to be set up for that, okay? So if we go up another notch and we go over to the SBU, it is inverter priority mode and switching to the mains only when the battery is under voltage or lower than the set value of the parameter, which is in the 4 setting. We'll come to that in a moment. That's the tricky part of this. You got to pay attention to, especially in the beginning, where you set your number 1 parameter, your number 4, and your number 5. Those are like super critical, and then there's a couple other ones that go along with it, okay? So right now, I've got mine set for SOL, which is PV priority mode, and then it switches to the mains when the PV fails. And I've set my parameters up to where it never really reaches that point. We hit enter again, and it goes back to the selection menu, and we can go up to number 2. Now in number 2, that's the output frequency. You can choose 60 Hertz or 50 Hertz. Right now, I'm at 60 Hertz. I'm in the good old USA here, and many other countries are the same way. You can set it to 50, not where we're at. We'll hit enter again for 60, and we'll go up a mode, and we're in the up system here, okay? Okay, and parameter setting number 3, that is our AC input voltage range. Mine is set on the uninterrupted power supply mode, which is the default, and that gives me a range of about 90 to 140 volts on a 120 volt machine, which is what I have. It's got another mode in there, which is APL, and that serves as a wider go over to here, voltage range. We really don't need it for this. We can narrow it down to a smaller voltage range and just go with the UPS here. We'll hit enter. Now we're back to that, and let's continue to go up to number 4. So number 4, this is a critical parameter. It really is. So this is battery power to utility set point. So this relates back to number 1 in our output source utility. So let's go down to this one right here. It's one of the first ones we set with SOL. So we go back up to number 4. So when that battery parameter of setting number 1, the battery voltage is lower than the set value, and the output is switched from the inverter to the mains. So when the voltage of the battery comes down to 21.8, and I can set that lower, or higher even, I'd be happy with that. When it gets set to that, it'll automatically switch over to the mains power supply, whether it be your house mains or your generator mains, okay? So that's a really critical set point there. Let's go ahead and go up to number 5. So number 5 is the other set point on the other spectrum of that. That's like your high end, so utility to battery set point. So again, it reaches back to value number 1 under Sol, right? And that's when that parameter there, the battery voltage is higher than that set value. So when it's higher than the set value of parameter 1, and the output is switched from mains to the inverter. So if it was to kick into, if the voltage was to drop all the way down to the set point of number 4, it would continue to charge using mains power supply or the generator until it got to this set point, which I could alter later on, but right now this is a standalone system, so I'm not too concerned about it, and we just keep an eye on it, okay? So that's a voltage range. So again, just to repeat myself, going back to number 4 here, if your battery voltage drops down to that set point, which on mine is 21.8 because I'm using a 24 volt system. If you're using a 48 volt system, it would be approximately 43.2 or 43.6, something of that nature, okay? We'll get into that, and I'll write those down on a chart that you can take a screenshot of and set everything up that way. But we're just rolling on the 24 volt system now, okay? So, and then that will continue to charge using your mains or generator backup all the way until it gets to setting number 5, which mine is set at 28 volts, which on yours would be 56 volts if you have a 48 volt system, okay? Okay, let's go ahead and go on to setting number 6. So currently mine is set up for OSO. OSO is basically only PV charging from the panels, with the mains charging not activated at all. That's a pretty critical one if you're not going to use mains power supply to run your inverter right now. Otherwise, the machine could go into a fault, like I'm looking for power, but I can't find it anywhere. So this is an important one. Now, if you want to switch it to where if the PV is not available and it'll start charging from the mains, you just got to hit enter, and then you could go up one, and you would be in the CSO mode, which would allow PV priority, but when the PV is not available, charging from the mains is started, okay? We could also go to the CUB where mains priority charging, and when that's not available, it would charge from the PV or the panels, right? Just the opposite of what I have mine set up as. And then SNU default is like a PV mains hybrid charging, and the PV charging is a priority, and when that's insufficient, the mains charging supplements. And when the PV energy is sufficient, the mains charging stops. So as a note, only when the mains bypass output is loaded, the PV charging and the mains charging can work at the same time. Right now, mine does work at the same time if I wanted it to, I suppose, but I don't have it set up for that. So basically, again, this is something, if you're going to use mains power, you might want to take a look at. Currently, we're not addressing that, and we're just going with this as a stand-up charger. We're just going with this as an all-in-one standalone charger, okay? So basically, I am in OSO mode. That is my favorite. And we'll hit enter, and we're back out into the selection menu. And we're going to go to max charger current, which is next. And so that's on parameter setting 7. We have got a max charger current of 0 to 100 amps. That can really rely on your battery packs, okay? And whether you have them connected in series or parallel. I have a 2 parallel 2 series configuration with mine that can go up to 200 amps of charging power, or no, 100 amps I want to say. But I don't even set it there. 60 amps is fine, okay? Now, if you're using like 4 100 volt LiFePo4 eco-worthy 100 volt, if you're using 4 12.8 volt 100 amp hour eco-worthy batteries in series, your amp hour for charging, or your amperage for charging, is going to be about 50. So you're going to want to set that down. And again, you would just hit enter. You would go down and up, right, and select the one you want. For me, I've got plenty of room with 60, and it seems to do just fine. When wintertime sets in, I may very well increase that because I got the allowance for it. I can go up to about 100 amps right now comfortably. And I may need to do that as wintertime comes and my days get shorter, okay? And I may need that extra bump here and there as the sun comes out. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to number 8, where you're gonna find your user mode, which is what I'm set into now. Right now, the default is for a gel type battery. If we go into enter, we go down. See, there's a lot of different options here. But there's your gel. That is the one that is set up as the default. If you're using lithium iron phosphates, you're going to want to change that. And I recommend using the user setting because all batteries have different ideal or optimal settings, okay? depends on what battery you're getting. So for me, I am in user settings, and that's the one we're really going to go over today, okay? So we'll just hit enter. We're back to that. Now, for the rest of the settings, not the rest of them, for the upcoming settings that go from 9 through 15 especially, are pretty darn critical for what I'm doing, okay? Okay, so for setting number 9, this is where the stuff gets really deep for the user settings of your battery. Now, we're going to be using or going over the settings for the lithium iron phosphate batteries. That's the one I'm most familiar with. I've had some lead acid in the past and also AGM in the past. They're big, they're heavy. I would rather have the lithium iron phosphate. So battery settings typically are covered on settings or parameters 9 through 21 and 28 through 37. But for the lithium iron phosphate, we're just going to cover 9 through 15. The rest of those are for lead acid type batteries. The 16 through 21 are for lead acid type batteries. We don't need to go over them. So let's go ahead and get into it a little bit. Let's go into enter here, okay? And right now I've got mine set up on number 9 at 29.2. So that is your battery boost charge voltage, or your absorb voltage. That's where you get your bulk at. That's where you want things to be charging at. I've got mine set for 29.2. I could actually lower that if I wanted to, because I'm at 12.8. Let's just figure that out really quick. So I am basically at, so a good charging parameter is 14.4 for a 12.8 battery. If we multiply that by 2, we're going to be at 28.8. Okay, so I could do a 28.8 for a max, or I could even go like 14.6 for my batteries. That would give me a 29.2, which is where I'm at right now. Not a bad setting for my particular batteries. I use an eco-worthy 200 amp hour 12.8 volt battery that is configured in the 24 volt configuration. Okay. Now, if you're running a 48 volt system, depending on your battery, it would approximately double. I will have a chart for this that you can look at and set your batteries appropriately. Now, let's go up to number 10. Okay, so for parameter number 10, that is our battery boost charge time. I've got mine set at the default of 120 minutes, which is 2 hours. Now, from what I configure, this isn't like, you know, the end of your charge time, like when the controller wakes up in the morning, it starts charging your batteries. In my experience right now, this will go until the batteries are charged, when it's at that point. What happens though is when it reaches that point, and just from the natural, like the surface voltage or surface charge, whatever you want to call it, that's on top of these lithium iron phosphate type batteries, they tend to drop off pretty quickly, even with a little bit of use. And when I've got mine set up now so that when it goes to like what I have set on setting number 11, which is 27.6, and I can set that lower too, but I just felt comfortable with 27.6. So when it gets down there, it'll actually bump it up, and it'll bump it up to the charging value or our boost charge value or absorb value of charging, which mine is like 29.2, for up to 2 hours before it stops. Mine only goes in and out of that and just tops it off at the 29.2, and then it rests for a while until it drops back down, then it tops it off. It works really well just to kind of keep the voltage up, so to speak. So, and you can adjust that again just by enter, and you can adjust that to any value you want, really. I could drop mine down to 27 if I wanted, or 26.6, let's just say. Let's do that. 26.6 just for fun. And we'll probably reset it later, but that's okay for right now. Let's go to setting number 12, which is your battery over discharge voltage delay. So mine's set at 21 volts, which is a default. So when the battery drops to this set point, after the delay time, which is set up in parameter 13, which is here, mine's like 5 minutes or so. Or 5 seconds, I forget. Whatever the 5 is for, 5 minutes to 5 seconds, I think it is. Basically, the inverter will stop inverting. So it'll stop. until the range comes back up again. I left that at default as I did setting 13. I left 13 at default, and then 15 I've got mine, or 14, sorry, I've got mine set to the default also, which is your battery under voltage alarm. I got mine set at 22 volts, which is the default. Now remember, if you've got a 48 volt system, that number's going to be different. It's going to be like 44 volts or something like that, okay? And I'm going to re-emphasize that periodically throughout this video and in my introduction and in the summary. Very, very important, okay? Because if you're using a 48 volt system and you set it at this setting, you're going to have problems, all right? You're going to have to jump start your battery to get them going again, okay? So, setting 15, I've got it set at 20 volts, which is the default, and that is the battery discharge limit voltage. And so when the battery voltage is lower than this point, the output is turned off immediately. Mine set at 20 volts. I could actually go higher than that, but I've never hit that point, which would give me 40 volts if I had a 48 volt system, okay? Again, that's up to discretion. I'll go over that a little bit more in my summary, and I'll have a chart laid out for you 48 volt system users, okay? So for the user menu, we're just covering 9 through 15, and that's fine. The rest of these settings, like 16, this is all for lead acid stuff here. So we got 16 through 21. Basically is all for your lead acid settings, okay? We're just going to skip that for now. I'm not using it. Now, we're going to skip through these really quick. You can look them up in the manual to see what they are. And we're going to settle in down around 28 is where the battery settings start up again, okay? So 28 is the max AC charge current. So I've got this set up for 40 amps. It's the default. That can increase with PV power, of course. I'm not using a mains or a generator, so for me, it means nothing. It'll never happen until I get my generator in place, okay? And again, you can set that just by hitting enter, and you can go up or down or whatever, okay? I've got mine set at max at 40. Enter, back up. Let's go up to 29. 29 is for split phase. That has nothing to do with this particular model. The SR series are not for split phase, by the way, okay? They are a standalone 120 or 240 or 110 or 220. So mine is disabled, which is a DI5 is what it reads out on the LED screen. 35. 35 is my battery under voltage recovery point. So when it hits 26 volts, which is the default, basically, it will restart after the battery voltage reaches this set point. So let's just say I go all the way down to my over discharge point. The inverter turns off. As it charges up and the voltage goes up in the battery, once it hits this 26 volts, it's going to go ahead and kick the inverter back on, and it'll start working again, okay? So let's move on up to setting number 36, which is your max PV charging current. 60 amps is the default. That's where I have mine set at, and I'm totally happy with that. Again, if you're running a 48 volt system and you've got 4 12.8 volt batteries in series, the eco-worthy batteries like a charge at around 50 amp hours, okay? When they're in series, it doesn't increase. It doesn't disperse that charge. They're all going to get 60 amp hours or 50 amp hours. So I recommend that when you're using that type of a configuration with those batteries, you go to enter and you drop this down to say 50 or 45 or something like that. Take it easy on your batteries. For me, I've got the parallel series configuration. I'm good for a whole bunch higher than that. So we'll go ahead and take her on up to 60, and I'm really happy with that setting right now. Okay, let's go on up to setting 37. That is a battery fully charged recovery point, and default is 26 volts. So after the battery is fully charged, it needs to be lower than this set voltage before it can be recharged. I set mine at 26 volts, not 36, 26 volts. So after the battery is fully charged It needs to be lower than this set voltage before it can be recharged. So that's kind of another set point before it starts to recharge again. And you could adjust that again just by going down. I've been happy with 26 so far. Seems to be a good round number to where it will in fact charge and keep the battery topped off. Which with these lithium iron phosphate style batteries, you don't have to discharge them down and charge them back up to get maximum life. You can keep them at the top all the time. It's actually pretty easy on them. So that's about it for the battery settings. Now we can go up to like number 38. 120 volt AC is the default. That's what I'm running. If you had something different, I guess you could change it and go up to, you know, up or down to 105 or 110. But I'm at 120 volts and I'm going to keep it there. All right. So really, that's about it for the battery parameter settings. And again, remember, if you're using a 48 volt system, you're going to want to increase those values, double them at least, okay?
Okay, so here's a chart that I put together for you guys with the name of each setting and the initial 38 parameters that mostly focus around the battery and whatnot. And you can see I've got a row for 24 volt systems and 48 volt systems. Your batteries are going to vary a little bit depending on what battery you get, but this should get you in the ballpark for sure, and they're rather conservative values, so you should be okay. You can notice like over on line 7 for 100 amp batteries, you're going to want 50 amps of charging power. If you're hooking 4 of your batteries in series, that's my recommendation anyway. So I would take a screenshot of this and save it during the time that you're actually setting up your battery parameters, so that way you have a reference.
Okay folks, so there you have it. That's where I have my settings for the 24 volt, 3000 watt, basically SRNE SR line, or the eco-worthy SRNE rebrand, which is the SR line, and the Midnitesolar, and you know, so on and so forth. Of course, the 48 volt, I just want to, if that's the system you're running, I just want to re-emphasize that those values are going to change, and please refer to the chart. Again, that's what's been working for me. Yours may vary slightly, but it's going to get you on the right track. I want to also emphasize or kind of touch on this subject again, that setting number 4 in the battery settings is I've got it set low, so that way when it drops down to a certain point, I don't want it to kick into the mains on accident. Say I set it at like 25 or 25.8 and everything's still running, yada yada yada. I don't want it to like kick over to the mains. I don't have a mains or generator hooked up right now, so it could throw up an error and kind of mess everything up. Also with number 5, you could set, that could actually be set lower if the mains or the generator wasn't in place. I don't see a problem with that, but I've been leaving mine where it's at, and it's just fine. And also on number 6, having that set OSO is critical if you don't have mains. If you want mains for a backup, you would use CSO, and there's a couple other different options there also, depending on how you want to work things. I have a standalone system here with no AC mains or generator backup, so I am running OSO. So basically, I think that's about it. Yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If anybody watches this and they think I did something wrong or I could make the settings better, man, please let me know. I'm always up for learning. This is a new controller for me, even as I try to figure it out and, you know, try to decipher what they're saying in the manual. Of course, as we all know, the manuals from China, sometimes they're not the most complete manuals. I think a lot of that has to do with language barrier. I really wish they had, like in English, like an installer's guide, so that way is a little bit more in-depth, so you could really look at some of these things, but to my knowledge they don't. So Anyways, it's all pretty freaking awesome, dudes, and I really appreciate y'all tuning in. Thanks. Super appreciate it. Like, subscribe, keep this channel going. Thanks, guys.